Hello and welcome, and this is Peter. The first thing I'd like to do is to say thank you very much for watching this video today. I really appreciate you. Thank you very much for being here. Today's video topic is, as you can see on the screen, how to map 6,000 to 8,000 fields per work month in an ETL environment. That's what we're going to be talking about today, okay? How to map between 6,000 and 8,000 fields per work month in an ETL environment. Now, you may be looking at that headline there on the video and saying, Pete, 6 to 8,000 fields mapped per work month? Not quite sure I'm ready to believe that. Okay? And you would be right to be skeptical because, to the best of my knowledge, nobody else can get anywhere near these numbers, right? Now, just to backtrack a little bit, when I was working with Sean Kelly and Associates, our estimate was 1,000 fields mapped per month in an ETL environment, and we were way faster than anybody else back then, right? We were way faster. Going to customers and saying, we know that we can map 1,000 fields a month across to our data models. Our customers back then were like, yeah, right. And we've been working at that sort of level. Just so you're aware, we were working at around the 1,000 fields per month being mapped since 2004 when I did Orange Romania, it was. The big innovation was being able to generate code directly out of the workbook, the mapping workbook. That was the innovation that got us from about 500 fields per month to 1,000 fields per month. The ability to read the mapping workbook with Visual Basic and to generate what was necessary directly out of the workbook, and not have to have a manual process taking a workbook which was documentation and converting it into code. We took a workbook which was essentially source code and translated it into more source code. That was our big breakthrough, to go from about 500 fields per month to 1,000 fields per month. And really, we didn't think we needed to go any faster. Okay, so from like 2004, 5, around there, right through to 2016, so like 10 years, we were like, well, 1,000 fields per month in mapping, so that's pretty good. We don't need to go any faster than that. Nobody else is getting any, it's been 10 years now, nobody else is even close. So that's kind of why we were doing that, right? Anyhow, to move the story forward, in 2016, I was doing a delta detection staging area system for a customer that had a Nav, Microsoft Nav ERP, and it had like 1,800 tables and 35,000 fields. And so doing a delta detection subsystem for the staging area couldn't possibly be done by hand. So I had to invent a new way to generate all the SQL to do the delta detection. And so I did. And what I found out after doing this, inventing this new way of doing delta detection systems, was, hey, we can do this with our mapping spreadsheet as well. And we tried it out, and it worked. So what I would say to you, firstly, of course, is if you're in the market for a delta detection system through to your staging area from something like Microsoft Nav, give me a call, because we can do that in about 2 weeks. The high end of the estimate is 2 weeks. It takes somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks to build all the code to do that. It takes longer to actually load the thing in the first place, longer elapsed time, because of just the sheer amount of data that needs to be transferred from the operational system over to the staging area. So yeah, we can build a delta detection staging area for pretty much anything, depending on what exactly is going on in the operational system. But for Nav, for those of you who are Nav users, there is a timestamp in Nav that we use, and so we know that we can build you a staging area in Nav in 2 weeks tops. Okay, and then you just run it through. It takes a couple of weeks to run it. Okay. Now what we did was we took the same idea that we used in the building of that delta detection SQL generation and applied that idea to the mapping workbook. Okay? Now, what I'm going to show you now is that mapping, how this all works. And I'll show you how we can now do between 6,000 and 8,000 mappings, fields mapped per work month. And of course, just to temper that a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, of course I mean if you have somebody of my sort of skill and you have a target data model to go to and you're implementing our C++ engine, then you're mapping up around 6 to 8K per month. If you don't have someone of my skill, if you don't have a target data model to work towards, if you're not going to use our C++ engine, like you're going to use our SQL engine, or you're going to use another ETL tool, well, obviously these numbers would come down a little bit, right? However, whichever way you slice it, getting to peaks of somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 fields mapped per month, per work month, is very, very interesting, I would think, to ETL people. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to hit pause and take you over to the screens. So here we are in a little SQL server. This is IBI Prod 02, and it is a prod machine that I had running doing real live production stuff a couple of years ago. I had my website on .NET Nuke, and I was doing things. I built a little .NET Nuke data warehouse, and I was doing things like monitoring file downloads and clicks on things, etc., just to see how the website was going. And I also used .NET Nuke as an example data warehouse that I could put out there because .NET Nuke was freeware and it had the data model available, and everybody can relate to a website. And so the example I'm going to show you is of course about downloads from a website. Now the first thing I'm going to show you here, this is in a little database. I called it IBI Hosting Services, just customer number 1. So I was my own first customer. There's a staging area and a data warehouse, right? And we have some tables, and down in these tables we have a thing called pre-mappings. And if I select top 1000 rows, we can see that there's a few rows in these pre-mappings. Now I'm going to show you how these rows got there and explain a little bit about the columns. I think it's this one. No, I have to find the right workbook. Pre-mappings. Okay, so we're in this workbook called pre-mappings. We'll scroll over to the left and I'll take you through this. Now this row number, this should actually increment like this. Now we have used the row number, process, there's a process flag, a row type if we want to put one in there that's never been used. SeETL view. SeETL view is the mapping name. So in SeETL language, when we say something is a SeETL view, that's the mapping name for the ETL piece. And it has a naming standard. We start it with Z01 and we end it with _NN. And in the middle is the name of the target table or view. So when I say table, I mean table or view. I just don't want to say table or view all the time. We use the prefix just to sort the views down to the bottom of the list, and we use the sequence number at the end because a single target view may have many mappings sending data into it. So for example, web download item transactions, you may have numerous websites that you're sending all the data from all the websites into the one data warehouse. Well, you would have different mappings for those things, right? So you have a SeETL view name, type of table, F for fact table, source database name. Where you see 4 hashes, that means variable substitution. So that's the variable, and this is what it will be substituted with. Very simple variable substitution. So this is the interesting bit. We have a primary source table and then secondary source tables. Now the first line of a pre-mapping always contains the primary source table name in the secondary source table and says, yes, this is the primary source table line, right? So you must always have at least one line which says primary source table, secondary source table. It's the same thing. And is this the primary source table row? You must always have one of those. So if data is only coming from one staging table going into a target dimension or fact table, you must have at least one row in the pre-mapping workbook telling you that. Now if in this case the data we want to put into the target download item transaction also comes from the URL log and URL tracking, so we have 3 staging tables that we want to get data out of and send it to the download transaction. Okay, download item transaction. So the way that we do this is we put the same primary source table at the front, so it knows it's all joined together, and we put the 3 tables in the order that we want them to appear in the mapping, and then we say no and no in the primary source table for the secondary, tertiary, etc. tables. So that's pretty simple to understand that. Sort order, we use this sort order to break up the cluster of fields from each table. So generally, it's like really unusual to have more than 9 staging tables in a query sending data to one target table. Like 9 is really stratospherically unusual. So we use 101, 201, 301 up to 901. Okay? And that's just going to make sure that the columns coming out of each of these are going to be grouped. So it'll say, okay, let's say this has 10 columns in it. There'll be 201, 202, 203, 204, etc. And this will be, from here, it'll be 301, 302, 303, etc. So it's just to group the tables. That's what that's used for. You can have descriptions. Fact table description is documentation. You don't have to have it, but some people like documentation. Then there is the target table you are sending this data to. So we're sending data from these 3 staging tables to this one target table. Okay? So the target table is named 3 times. But really it's only going to be taken from the first row. In our data models, every table gets a number and every view gets a number. And we just manage these numbers because it's easier to talk about table numbers than table names, is what that is about. Mapping key, now we can put in here an expression that will give you the unique row for this transaction. This is a fact table mapping. We can put in here an expression that gives us a unique row, and that's why I put it there. However, in practice, when using this, we don't actually use this. We let the mapping key go through and we put the expression inside the mapping workbook. We then have a from clause, and you can see that this from clause is not formatted. Now you may be saying, so Pete, why is the from clause not formatted? And the reason is we take this data, we put it into the dictionary that we have, the SeETL dictionary. We then run a query on that dictionary to create the rows to go into the mapping spreadsheet, and those rows are put into the mapping spreadsheet just using cut and paste. Now if we put new lines and things like that into here and just use cut and paste, those new lines won't paste properly into the mapping spreadsheet. So to be able to paste what's in here directly into the mapping spreadsheet, you must have no new lines. That's why it looks like this. So you have a choice. If the from clause is simple, then you can put it in here and that's fine. If the from clause is more complicated, like you're seeing here, then what you might do is just put a marker here and then put the from clause actually into the mapping spreadsheet directly. Don't go through this field. Because all this is going to do is take this information and put it into the from clause in the mapping workbook. And you can go in there, cut and paste and put things over it. Now in the mapping workbook, you can have formatting in your from clauses and your where clauses. But you can't have that formatting here. Alright. Now we have a where clause, same deal with the where clause. No new lines in the where clause in this workbook. It is possible to have an order by clause and a group by clause. So you have a flag to say yes or no, and then you have the actual clause. But in reality, we rarely put order by clauses and group by clauses into the views that are pulling data out of the staging area in SeETL. Yes, we do it sometimes, but it's pretty rare. Moving right along, there are some documentation fields. There's 10 user columns and 5 notes columns that you can use. I should take these ones out. 10 user columns, 5 notes columns. So that's a pre-mapping. And you would look at that and go, hey Pete, that looks pretty simple. I can give myself a primary source, some secondary sources. I tell it what view I want. I give it a from clause. I give it a where clause. You mean that's it? That's what I do. Where are all the fields, Pete? Okay. You might be asking yourself the question, that's all very nice, but I've got 3 tables here. Where are all the fields that are going to be mapped? How does that work? Well, I'm going to show you how it works, obviously. We hit save. In processing, we'll see pre-mapping 01 definitions table. We'll see it has a substitution variable. We go to the substitution variable. We see it is SeETL036 pre-mapping, the table that we had. This table. So what we're going to do, just to prove the point, better connect it to the right database. We're going to delete from that table 3 rows affected. We're going to run the query again. Gone. We're going to come over to a command prompt. Now, of course, you can just if you are using a user ID that is an administrator, you can just double click on the command. If you're not an administrator, you have to right click and say run as administrator. Or you can open up a command prompt. You see this is opened as an administrator. I've put the command in here before. It's A400 did W pre-mappings. And if we go over here, we'll see we have local disk A, IBI hosting, customer 1, stage commands. We see we have a bunch of commands there. I'll just open it up so that you can see what the command is. I'll let it wrap around. So you see that it's SeETL console 3200, which is the Visual Basic application, compiled and linked and put into somewhere that the Windows path can see. And you have a parameter called -filename. Pretty obvious that that's the spreadsheet that you want to process, and the spreadsheet must be saved as XML. And let me just close a little bit more. And then there's -log file name, and that's just where you put the log for the processing of SeETL, and we recommend that you always log your processing, because if there's an error, then the log is there. If there's not an error, you ignore the log. If there is an error, then the log is already there for you. So that's a simplest commands. And I hit go, and it's done. So that's very quick because it's not doing that much. Now it's 1804 on the 30th of January. We hit execute here. Our 3 rows are back with our right mapping rows. And let's have a look at the logs. This is sorted by date modified. We see 30th of January 2019, 1804. And we send that to TextPad. And we see it joined to that DSN on that server. It's using that table. And we see the first thing it did was execute a delete from this table for the mapping spreadsheet name and the version number. And then you can see it does 3 inserts. Insert, insert, insert. You can see the 3 inserts. And if we scroll across, you'll see the 3 tables mentioned in the inserts. So it's done a delete and 3 inserts. And it started at 1804.48 and finished at 1804.49. So it's finished within a second. That's the log. Now, if we look at that and go, okay, right, I got you, Pete. The 3 rows are loaded into the pre-mapping table. How does that help me? Where's the magic? I'm going to show you where the magic is, ladies and gentlemen. You see this query? Select star from Z01 select mapping spreadsheet SS99, and we order by user column 1 and source column number. Now this source column number is using that sort order number. Okay? And user column 1, we ran out of columns, so we use user column 1 to put the name of the primary table going into the mapping in user column 1. So we will sort by user column 1. Now I've only got those in the pre-mapping table. I've only got the one pre-mapping. So I don't have to put a where clause on here or anything to select the mapping that I want. Obviously, if you keep a history of your pre-mappings and things like that, we typically don't. We typically don't keep our pre-mappings around. We do them and throw them away, because the only use for the pre-mapping is to get the mapping for the workbook. Once we've got the mapping for the workbook, the pre-mapping is out of date. It's redundant. So we have this view, select mapping SS99, ordered by user column 1, source column number. Let's run that and see what we get. Here is our output. We will just size it properly. Now in the SeETL workbook, which you should be familiar with, if you've gotten to here and you've never seen the SeETL workbook, you should really go and watch one of the videos demonstrating the SeETL workbook. So we have the first column in the SeETL workbook is the column, do you want to use this column? So we set that to yes. We have row types of derived, D for derived and M for move. We'll come back up. Source name, we have source owner, source table. You see we have DNN files. Source column number, which is using the sort. So down here, we've got 202. And then we go to 303, 304, URL. We're going to 403, URL tracking 503. And then at the end, we've got 1091, 1092, etc. Okay. So we've got these X's for source column name, and I will explain that later. We've got the data type, source column length, precision, scale. Is it nullable? So that's information for the person doing the mappings to look at it and say, okay, so this is nvarchar. It's 510 characters with a precision of 255. Okay, well, I know what's in there. That's the URL, for example. So if what we do is the person doing the mapping is also the person building the target data model. So that person needs to know the data types of these fields coming across. And we do a lot of that. In fact, and you'll find this stunning, when I do these things, we generally, the DBA doesn't build the data warehouse. I build the data warehouse and the DBA checks my work, because in most of my projects, the DBA is training, and his job is to catch my mistakes and learn. So you can do all this work with one person. You don't need an ETL designer, ETL programmer, and data warehouse data modeler. All this can be done by one person. Table type is fact. Source column required is yes. You see the SeETL view name, which is the mapping name. You've got your column numbers. You've got column names. And I'll get into these char keys a little bit later. But these are the column names from the staging tables. So when you looked at the 3 rows and said, okay, that's all very nice, Pete, but where are all the column names? Here are the column names. Because part of what that view does is go to the dictionary of the database, the catalog, and get the column names for all the columns in all these tables and bring them back out into this column and put them in the target column as well. So it's filling up the spreadsheet. Now what we do with this information, once we've done this mapping like this, we click the use flag, we click to the end, we do copy, we don't need the headers, and we go back to here, and you can see I've got this demo worksheet, right? And I'm going to paste here. Now it might be a little small. You should be watching this on a high res screen. I'll just make it 110 just to improve it a little bit. But if you've watched any of the demonstrations about the mapping workbooks, you'll notice, hey, this looks like a filled-in mapping workbook. Wow, the view did that, right? The view did that, and I'll show you what it does in a little while. Now, to explain what happened, we have in our target data model in BI for All, we have a view called VF Web Download Item Transaction. We actually have that table already defined. And in that definition, we say these are all the, let me just go here. These are all the detailed keys from lookup tables, dimension tables, that can be placed on this row from our data model. All these things might be there. Some of them might not be there, but all these things could be there. So the data model says, yeah, I have this VF Web Download Item Transaction view table. I have all these detailed keys on it, and this piece of magic SQL fills in all these char keys based on the names inside the dictionary for the target table. So it has filled these in already and given them the correct names. And if you've been watching along on any of the other videos, you'll know that, let's say, the transaction date. Obviously, when a link is clicked on a website and a file is downloaded, that happens on a certain date, right? So we would obviously want to be able to analyze that by date. So we pass the date in as a character key, and just by doing this, it will do the lookup for us and go and get the date, the ID for the date, and put it here. And it does that for everything. So it's done this automatically, gentlemen. It's done this automatically. Down here we see PK VF Web download item transaction. Our fact tables all have primary keys at the front, and we put these primary keys on them at the front. What's the primary key? If you look at the select statement, it says select last key allocated from SeETL sequence numbers, where the sequence name is the name of the mapping, and then add row number over this partition. So this statement is going to go get the last key, and then it's going to add 1 to it for each row, thereby giving me a unique key for each row. And I didn't have to code this. This is created for me through the piece of that little magic SQL, the magic of the view. Now up here, we've put X's in all these things. We would have to code in here the strings that are going to be used in the lookups to produce the integer keys. So we do have to code this bit, but look at what's already filled in, right? And if we don't want a line used, we just put a no in the first column, and then it will ignore it. It won't load it. So there's files. Here's the tracking columns. Here's the log columns. So here, for example, we've got the click date, we've got the DK user ID. So what date was it clicked on and what user ID clicked on it, and that will probably be a date and time. You can see date and time there. So we can pick that up, and that date would go into this lookup for download item date, for example. And I'll show you that in the end. Down the bottom we add PKSS number, PK customer number. We've got the coalesce of the batch number. So we maintain batch numbers and file cycle numbers and things like that for audits. We've got the coalesce of the file cycle number. We've got the table number, view number. You can see that. We put the current timestamp on everything. And here is our from clause. Now, as I said earlier, if I want this to be formatted so it's a little bit easier to read, I can format this from clause in this cell, and that's okay, because we never cut and paste this anywhere. This can be read into the data and put into the database, and it will be read to generate the view, but this won't be pasted into another spreadsheet. So we can put formatting in here if we like. Same for the where clause, we can put formatting in here. So what do we need to do? What else do we need to do? Well, we might want to change our column names in our target table. In our target table, we may have some column names which already match some of these things. And we would match, let's say folder was known as basket, just for argument's sake. Folder was known as basket. So we would click here and type basket. That if this table had a field called basket and folder should really go into basket, then we would just type basket there. Click date. We might have a naming standard which says you must say date of whatever. So click date in DNN, we might have a naming standard that says that should be called date of click. So we would change that to date of click. That's all we would have to do, and the mapping would work. URL, we might have a naming standard that says what we call URL is your full URL. We have a short URL or URL full, URL short. So maybe this needs to be URL full and we just type URL full in there. But that's how that works. We just type into the target column the name of the target column we want, and it's going to be mapped. And any field that we don't want mapped, we just put an N in the first column. We leave it there and we put an N in the first column. Now you might be looking at this and saying, hey, that's pretty cool. You mean that that piece of SQL looks at your dictionary where you've stored your data model and it maps the source columns in the staging tables via the target table that you set. So we told it a target table. Let's go back here. We have these three tables, one mapping, three tables, and we gave it a target table. And your target table, you say, Pete, is in this dictionary, and it goes and gets all the fields from the staging area catalog, not a dictionary that you have, but from the staging area catalog, and it maps to that target table so that if it's a fact table and you've got lookups, it prepends all the lookups for you and then puts all the field moves in for you and then puts in the extraneous audit stuff like the batch number and the file number and the timestamps and the table numbers. All those things get added at the back. Then your from and your where clause gets added in, and if you had group by, order by, then they get added in as well. You're saying this piece of magic SQL does all this, Pete? And the answer is yeah, the piece of magic SQL does all that, and I'll show you how it does it in a little minute. Now, you may be wondering, sitting there saying, okay, Pete, so you said in previous years, like from, you said 2004, 5, around that period when you did Orange Romania, and the idea of using VB to read the spreadsheet to generate code was created. You said that took you from about 500 fields a month, work month, to 1,000 fields a work month. And you're saying that this, what I'm just seeing being demonstrated, just this one simple worksheet plus a piece of SQL magic that you're going to explain to us and give to us for free. Thank you very much, Pete. You're saying this can somehow get us to like 6,000 or 8,000, or you can get you to 6,000 or 8,000 fields mapping. How come like the 6 to 8 multiplier? Can you show me why would I get a 6 to 8 multiplier? And I would say to that, yep, I'm exactly going to show you that. So here we have a previous spreadsheet. This one that's actually filled in, and you should have a copy of this in your downloads. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to where this ends, to where the mappings end. All right. And I'm going to explain to you how did we used to do it when we were doing 1,000 fields per month. How did we used to do it? How we used to do it was we'd build our staging area and we'd have all the tables in the staging area, all the fields, and we'd fill that with data and we'd analyze our staging area and we'd scratch our heads and we'd say, okay, we've got everything that's interesting in this company in our staging area. Let's start thinking about what we're going to move forward. We'll start with the most important stuff and kind of work our way down. So what we used to do, our SeETL software has tools to build staging areas such that you can build a pretty good staging area in 4 weeks. Like really. With delta detection and generation in there, you can build a pretty good staging area in 2 weeks. As a development environment, I mean. So if you can get a pretty good staging area in somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks, what we do, is we just throw everything into the staging area. If it looks interesting, it goes into the staging area so that we can analyze it more fully, and we have profiling tools and all this sort of stuff for the data in the staging area. So we go we build our staging area, and then we just go and do a command on the staging area to bring this back, this sort of data back. And you've seen this, table name, column name, data type, length, precision, scale, nullability, etc. You've seen stuff like this coming out of catalogs, and we just bring them all back. You see threading, threads, posts, tab modules, tab permissions, tabs. This is all from .NET Nuke, so it's all about websites. Yeah, modules, module setting, affiliates, announcements. It just all comes back like this, right? Then what we have to do, of course, is at the beginning, I'll take you up. So this is what we get back. We've got to fill in the fields on the left. Yeah. So let's actually look at a forum post. This is working on this machine. A forum post. So .NET Nuke has forums on it, and obviously you can post into a forum. So what else did we have to do? Well, we had to add all these char keys because that was empty. It only went up to here, right? It went up to nullability. We've got to fill in everything to the right of nullability, right? So we had to fill in the CTL view name, and you see the column numbers are set to 1. We had to fill in the view column and the char keys, and we had to fill in these keys. We had to cut and paste them and edit them and all the rest of it. We had to cut it out of the generated DDL for the table and edit it a little bit, paste it in here. Then we have to do a change for the char key and the Z, and just it adds up, right? It adds up. We had to add in this line for the primary key for the CTL sequence number, and we had to cut and paste that into position. And we had to create this application system reference number string. This is your mapping key. So where you saw mapping key, that would have said mapping key, and now we've had to do this. And then we've had portal ID. Now you see where there's blanks here, that means this field is not being put into the target table, but we're keeping the field anyway. You see the yes, the field will come out in the view, but because there's no target, it'll just be ignored. So the portal key is moving over, the portal name is moving over, the forum group key, the forum name, it's moving over, and then the number of replies, the pin flag, image, object type, these things are moving into the transaction. Yeah? Post approved timestamp, post reporter flag, all these things are moving over. So, what did we have to do? We cut and pasted these columns over to here. We added suffixes for some things, and then we had to figure out which fields did we want them to go to in the post transaction. Had to do all that. We had to add the batch number. We had to add source system number, client number, table number, batch number, file cycle number, view number, current timestamp. We had to add all those. And then we had to put the where clause, the from clause into it. So you can see this from clause is formatted. Okay? And that gets put in the database, it gets put into views, and it's just easier to read as being formatted. So we had to do all that. And this all adds up. Adding all these bits and pieces to the spreadsheet, it all adds up, and it's actually quite time consuming. Because in this case, of course, we've got to bring things from forum posts, forum threads, forums, groups, portal localization, portals, all together. All these fields, all these tables have to come out and be put into these rows and get written into this where clause. That all takes time. versus if I know that they're the tables that I need, and that's the from clause that I need, I can just put them into the pre-mappings, and it will, and I tell it which sort orders I want, and it will do all this for me. Right? It will go get the columns from the table and sort them in the order I specify by the sort order sequence, and then give me all these columns like this. And then my job is, in the target table, do I delete the cell or do I change the name of the cell? So for example, in this one, object type code is one word. We have a standard which says put underscores between words so they're more readable. So object type code becomes object type code with underscores. DK object ID, that's actually a foreign key. It's the object ID foreign key in this table. So we call it, we have a standard which says if it's a key from the source system, we give it an SS as a prefix, and we give it underscore key as a suffix, and in the middle we describe it. So DK object ID becomes SS object ID. DK answer post ID becomes SS answer post key. DK answer user ID becomes SS answer post user key. See? And I can tell you, gentlemen, this takes time to go through. It's very dull, it's very boring, it's very tedious, and it does take time. And when we were doing 1,000 mappings a month, we thought, well, we'll never go any faster than that. There's no need to go any faster than that. 4 months for 4,000 fields, that's so fast compared to what we used to do. How could you possibly want to go any faster? Well, you could possibly want to go faster if you have an ERP with 35,000 fields in it. Okay? Like the nav system that one of the things I'm working on at the moment is a warehouse for nav. The nav system that we have has got 35,000 fields in it. Well, we can't wait 35 months to do the mappings for it. We've got to find a much faster way of doing mappings for it than 1,000 fields per month, or we have to cut a lot of things out. One of the two, right? But if we can do 6,000, let's say 6,000 fields per month mapping, and we got 35,000 fields, hey, suddenly we're down to like a 6-month project. Well, that's pretty doable, a 6-month project. Particularly if you start with all the important stuff and leave the less important stuff for a little later. Yeah? So that's what we have. That's what we used to do. We used to have to put all this stuff in. And now when we go back to forum post transaction, we'll go back to the top. And so you see we have ZVM web forum post transaction date. That's going to do a lookup. It's going to do this DNN forum post creation date. It's going to convert it to the 120 format, which is year dash month dash day. That's what that convert does. And it's going to send it back to us as a varchar, right? So we're going to get year dash month dash day is going to be sent out of this for the creation date. It's going to go into the char key. It's going to do a lookup, and it's going to put the integer key there. And that's what we have to do with each of these forums. It's going to generate this string and send this string into there. Right? And it does that with each one. And then down here, there might be a little bit of formatting. There isn't any in this one. I'll go up to the top, and there is in the things at the top. So this is Outlook contacts. This is literally, you can download your Outlook contacts and run them through this. So you see when char index linked in categories, then yes, no. You see these char index things here. So we have this ability to do any SQL manipulation we want on the way through. We can do cases, we can clean columns, we can translate columns, all this sort of stuff we can do in here. This is going to be put into a view, so anything that is able to be done in the database that you're using, in this case SQL Server, can be put into these views. So gentlemen, that's how we get our somewhere between 6 and 8 times productivity, because the little piece of magic SQL generates these rows for the workbook, and we just cut and paste them into the spreadsheet. Now I can hear you say, that sounds fascinating, Pete. You know what? I'd really like to see the views. I'd really like to see what's going on behind that view. Yeah? That's what I hear you say, and I go, thank you very much for the question. So let's go into the views. And we'll scroll down and we'll go find this view. Here they are. Now the view you saw was SS99. You just saw one view, mapping SS99. Well, that view, if we script it, and this view is in your downloadables. You have this view for free. Create view S99, and I can see, well, there's 15 plus 1, 2, 3, so there's 18 views which are doing a union all. So there's 18 views that do a union all, Pete. What's that all about? How does that work? So let's pick the last one, because the last one's the most instructive one. We have select mapping SS33. Okay. And if we scroll down to the bottom, what we see is we have the SeETL036 pre-mapping. That's the table that you saw. And we have a target table. Yeah, you saw that. And then we have the SeETL036 views doc5. Now in the views doc5 table, that's where we keep in our dictionary the names of the columns in the views in the data model. That's what's in there. The names of the columns in the views. And we're mapping target table to the view name, because I said target table can be a table or a view. We're mapping the target table to the view name. We're asking, is the table type an F, meaning is it a fact table, or FA, a fact association table. Now if the column on the view starts with DK, that means it's DK means detailed key. So if the column on the view starts with DK, and I've limited to one data model, because in our dictionary you can load many data models from many spreadsheets, or you can load portions of data models from many spreadsheets. So the dictionary obviously supports many data models, and it supports data models in up to 10 languages in our dictionary. It's all there. It's all there for free. You've downloaded it. And if the primary source table flag is set to yes, meaning we only do this test for the first row going in, then it's going to give me some information back. So what's it giving me? It's giving me this char key Z. Now you may want to invent a different naming standard. You would just go in and edit this view for yourselves, right? But it's giving me this char key Z, and it's giving me this view column name, right? And it's putting XXXX in the source column name. So if we look at this char key Z, this XXXX, this view column name, target table yes, and we go to our spreadsheet, and we see the XXXX, we see our detail key, we see our char key. Well, these are the things coming out of here. Target column, char key, getting the column name, substringing it from the 4th position for 100. So it's getting the column name, it's taking the DK underscore off, and it's putting char key Z in front of it. So our naming standards for detailed keys, for lookup keys, is DK underscore VM, etc. Okay? So if we look over here in the spreadsheet, DK VM web store. So it's stripping off DK underscore and adding char key Z VM web store. Right? So you can see that's what it's doing right there. That's what it's doing right there. So you can see what this is doing is it's generating rows for the char key lookups, and then the sort order, we're doing sort order plus 1 plus row number, and that's going to give us the char keys at the beginning of the rows going into the spreadsheet, sorted by the order of the columns in the data model. Right? How cool is that? Now, what are some of the other things this does? The first ones are pretty boring. So we'll jump into, say, number 6. Number 6 is giving us the cols of the file cycle number. So it's giving us the row, which is a cols file cycle control file cycle number, and stick it in PK file cycle number. If we look at our spreadsheet, that's this line. It's generating this line for that one mapping and sending it out through the view, and then the external view is going to sort it to get it into the right position. So that's 6. I bet 5 is the batch number. Let's see if it is. Yeah. So 5 is SeETL file cycle control batch number. Put the answer into the batch number for the primary source flag. And when we look at our spreadsheet, that's this row. It's being generated. Yeah? How cool is that? Literally, how cool is that? So this set of views, the bright idea, the secret, the magic, the secret sauce is what we can do is we can create a whole series of views, and these views, each individual view, is just putting out one or more rows about its own little subject area for what needs to go into the mapping spreadsheet, or whatever spreadsheet it is. It's putting out its own little subject area. There's like a beginning on the spreadsheet, and then for a mapping there's like a beginning of things, then there's the body of things, then there's the audit of things, and then there's the from and where clauses. Yeah? So it puts out each little bit of these, and then in the external view, the one that does the union all, it just sorts the output so that when it comes out, it's in the order that you want it in. And it was this idea of if we put more information into the dictionary and we get smarter about how we query this dictionary and pull information out, we can increase our productivity. Right? Now, one of the things that we've been looking at for years while we were looking at this stuff is how do we make the generation of these sort of things more intelligent? Is there intelligence that we can build into this somehow? And that's a work in progress. But you can see now that given this mapping spreadsheet has access, these views have access to go get all the source columns from the staging area, the columns from the target data model, you can pretty well see that if we could build more intelligence into it, it could automatically start filling out target columns. If we built more intelligence into it, it could start figuring out what lookups to feed into the lookups. Yeah, you can see how that would work. And it's just code. So with SQL Server, you can plug in anything you want, any function you want into a view. So the more intelligent this becomes, the faster the mappings will go. Yep. So let me just take you back to the startup slide, because that's the end of this presentation. So I just want to summarize. What did I tell you? What did I show you in this 1 hour? We're just on the hour. What did I show you? Well, I told you that from 2004, when we invented the capability of reading a mapping spreadsheet with Visual Basic, manipulating the spreadsheet to produce code as output, so the spreadsheet became code and not documentation, we went from about 500 fields mapped per work month up to about 1,000 fields mapped per work month. So before Orange Romania, I did Saudi Telecom, and we had 2,000 fields in the billing system in Saudi Telecom. And that did take about 5 months to do the mapping for those 2,000 fields. About 5 months, if my memory serves me correctly. And we thought we were doing pretty damn good, right? In Orange Romania, we hit the very next project, we hit 1,000 fields per work month in mappings. So I said to you, from like 2004, 5, whenever that was exactly, through to 2016, 1,000 fields per month. We were pretty pleased with that, and Sean Kelly and I won a number of data warehouse projects with that sort of rate of mapping. The most notable one, the one that's on my website, is Carphone Warehouse. And Carphone Warehouse, we're happy to say at the time, this is 2009, that this was we were 5 times faster in mapping development than their previous best efforts. And I trained Carphone Warehouse people on doing mappings this way. And they were really happy to be going up to 1,000 fields a month. They were really happy. So we didn't look for more productivity benefits until I ran into the situation where we needed to do a delta detection subsystem for a Microsoft Nav customer, where they had 35,000 fields in their Nav system. And our Nav mapping, our delta detection generation speed, because there's less work, was about 1,000 fields per week. We could do delta detection manually for about 1,000 fields per week. So that was like 35 weeks, which is going to be the best part of a year. And we went, no, that doesn't look very acceptable. So let's find a better way. And that's where I invented this idea with the view that generates portions of the entry for the next spreadsheet it's going into. And we did one live, a real live one. That was in 2016. It's in production today. It runs twice a day. The SQL generated for that customer runs extracts against their production nav system twice a day. Takes about 25 to 30 minutes to extract all the changes for the last 12 hours. And all those changes for the last 12 hours are fed into the staging area. And in the overnight ETL, all changes go through to the data warehouse. That's the ETL that runs from late at night, early in the morning. And each evening, there's a shorter version of the ETL that runs, and it just does some general ledger stuff. So that each evening, the portion of the data warehouse that deals with the general ledger is updated, because we know that accountants love to count things as late as possible. So each evening, the accountants have access to transactions which arrived into the nav system by 6 p.m. Now, obviously this is for a retailer. Obviously, there's lots of stores that are not closed at 6 p.m. They have many stores that don't close until much later at night, right? 10, 11, some 12. Some stores are near 24 hours. So, it's not exactly right, but we know that accountants like to get up-to-date numbers. So when we did that, and that only took 2 weeks to build that staging area, I looked at it and went, hey, we should be able to use this idea and apply it to the mapping workbook. And if we apply it to the mapping workbook, I think we'll get a big productivity jump. And so I did that and I tested it. And in our testing, I think we're getting productivity up around 8K fields mapped per month. Now, we haven't sat down and mapped this whole ERP yet. I'm not going to say that we've done that. I'm not going to say that we've measured this on a large project at 6,000 to 8,000 fields mapped per month. I'm not going to say that because we haven't done it. But we have done quite a few mappings in this Nav ERP using this sort of technology. And from what I can see in doing these mappings, these are the sort of productivity numbers that we're looking at. Now, you may or may not believe me. That's fine. I don't really mind whether you disbelieve me. What you can now do, because I've made SeETL free, if you've got an ERP or if you've got an existing mapping subsystem, ETL subsystem for your data warehouse, you can download all the software. You can replicate a portion of what it is that you've done in, say, Informatica, DataStage, or SSIS. You can replicate it, you can look at it, you can study it, you can see how it works, and then you can make your own assessment of, okay, so let's say we've got an ERP with 20,000 fields in it, and we've mapped 5,000 fields through to our data warehouse because, with Informatica, DataStage, and SSIS, we just can't afford the time and the effort and the money to map them all, right? You may be in that position, which is the position most people are in, by the way. The vast majority of people out there that I talk to are in the position that, yeah, it's easy enough to get all our data into a staging area, although some people can't even manage that yet. But once we've got all our data with its diversity into the staging area, we only map a portion of it into the data warehouse, that portion that we perceive to be of most value. And, we have to do a cost-benefit analysis, and there's a cutoff point. When we get to this cutoff point, the data's in the staging area, we can ask it a question, but it doesn't make it to the data warehouse because the cost of putting it in there for the ETL processing is more than what we think it's worth being in the data warehouse. And the problem with that is the people who are making the decision about what they think the data is worth is the IT people doing the ETL subsystem, not the business people. Okay? So I would argue if you take all the data from your staging area and put it all into the data warehouse and make it all visible from the data warehouse, yeah, sure, some of that effort will be wasted. Yeah, we know. We know that not everything in a staging area or not everything in an operational system is hugely valuable in the management decision-making process. But if you put it all in there, then you don't ever have to ask the question, is there something that's in the operational system that we really need that didn't make it, and can we get that put in, please? No, you don't have to do that. You say, everything you could possibly want is in there, ladies and gentlemen. Go query that database to your heart's content. By the way, as changes come along into your ERP subsystem, because you're asking for new functionality in your ERP system, we'll add that too. But one of the great things about this is most ERP systems have, pretty much every functionality known to man, and you turn on the ones that you paid for and you want to use. But the tables are generally there. Okay, for the other things, the tables are there. They're just empty. So if you map even those tables through to the data warehouse, you say, well, the table's empty, but they might turn it on one day. If you map those through to the data warehouse properly, and each day it runs and says, well, it's empty, I'm not going to do anything, then when they start using it, you will immediately have that data there in your target data warehouse. You won't have to write a ticket to say, okay, well, we've changed the functionality we're using in our ERP, and we're putting in this development ticket, this support ticket, and we want you to add this to the data warehouse. And yeah, we know it's going to take a month or two, and we know that we just have to wait for that. You don't have to do that. Just take everything. Because using SeETL, it becomes sensible to take everything. And I think those of you who have Informatica, DataStage, and say SSIS, I think if you download the whole kit and caboodle, you replicate some of the mappings that you've already built, and you look at it, study it, and understand it, and then think about the productivity profile of supporting the SeETL mappings versus supporting the Informatica, DataStage, SSIS mappings, whatever mappings, I think you'll find that SeETL will come up good as a replacement, even on the cost of supporting and changes where where you have already spent the money to do the development, right? I think you'll still find that SeETL comes out in front. Now, of course, those customers that have not done their development for their data warehouse yet, those customers that are thinking about a data warehouse, they can get SeETL, download it, use it, build their data warehouse as a prototype using SeETL, and then they can go to the vendors, get the vendors in, get the vendors to show them how their ETL software works, replicate a few things. And I think what you will find is that SeETL vastly outdoes Informatica, DataStage, and SSIS in development time and effort. And I mean vastly. One thing I would add at that point is we have ways, there are some customers who have a big investment in DataStage, Informatica, SSIS, and they wouldn't change no matter how much money it was going to save. There are some customers like that. You can do your development in SeETL, and we have ways for DataStage and Informatica to take that development and convert it into DataStage/Informatica mappings very, very quickly. And I'll give you the example again of Carphone Warehouse. Now, in Carphone Warehouse, we wrote version 1.0 of the warehouse. We had 75 dimension tables and 55 fact tables. It was all developed with SeETL. It all ran with SeETL, but they were a big Informatica customer, and part of the requirement was this new data warehouse had to integrate with everything else that Informatica was used for, and it was going to be supported by the same group of guys, the Informatica guys. So into production we had to deliver Informatica. We converted and proved that it worked side by side, the SeETL ETL and the Informatica ETL, in 3 weeks. That's conversion plus running test cases sufficient to prove to the test manager that the conversion was successful, not a single field was damaged, and there was 4,000 fields. Okay? That's impressive, gentlemen. That is really impressive, because when we had the meeting with the test manager, we had to, the deal of course in those sort of companies is the test manager has to say, I approve this going into production, or you do not go into production. That's how that works. And so we had to have a meeting where we had the test manager sit down and say, I approve this to go into production. We have to have that meeting. And it's with the project sponsor and project manager and a few other business analysts and a few other people around, because it's an important meeting, right? And the test manager sat down and he had to explain to the system owner what he had done and why he, in his opinion, this system should be released to production. He had to do all that. So this test manager did all that, and during that he said, this was the smoothest effort at testing I've ever encountered in my professional career. These guys are to be congratulated on what it is that they've done. And I was sitting there going, oh yes, yes, music to my ears, right? So we invented a process that took all the SeETL ETL and just converted it and migrated it, some manual process, but converted and migrated it into Informatica ETL, and we did the side-by-side comparison and proved that it all worked, and the test manager approved it. Because of course what we did previously was we had the test manager involved while we were building the data warehouse using SeETL and coming up with our numbers using SeETL. The test manager was involved in that whole process so that he could audit and balance what it was we were doing. And the test team built all these audit scripts to make sure that what we were doing in SeETL balanced. And that was all approved. And after that was all approved, we had the conversion process, and that had to be approved again. And that conversion process is what I'm talking about, taking 3 weeks. So during that conversion process, the test team weren't auditing and testing and validating all the work we were doing. They'd already done that during the lifetime of the project, and this was the last step of verifying that the migration across to Informatica worked accurately. And we can do the same with DataStage. So even if you've got Informatica or DataStage, if you have new source systems coming in, mergers, acquisitions, and all these sorts of things, and you have to do them with Informatica DataStage, you can do them with SeETL, get it all working, migrate it across to Informatica DataStage, integrate it into an already existing suite. That's for the large customers who are committed to these things, have support teams in place, and they just have to use whatever it is that they're already using for their ETL subsystems. You can use SeETL even in that environment, right? But I would argue for the smaller to medium customers who've bought Informatica, who've bought DataStage, or who use SSIS, and you have ongoing cost profiles for maintaining your ETL subsystems, if you take the hit of migrating across to SeETL, you will generally see about a 50% productivity improvement in support. You'll generally see a stability improvement. You'll see a performance improvement in support as well. SeETL will run faster than DataStage in general, and DataStage and Informatica in general. It will be more reliable as an ETL subsystem than DataStage and Informatica in general. And your support costs will go down in general. But don't take my word for it. Ladies and gentlemen, the entire source code's there, the package is there, you can download it and you can try it out for yourself. Yeah? You can try it out for yourself. Now with that, that's an hour and 17 minutes. I think this is possibly the second most important presentation I'm doing with respect to ETL subsystems, the most important one being showing people how the mapping spreadsheet works in the first place, and you can go back through the catalog of videos and have a look at that. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate your time and attention, and I hope that you will download our SeETL and have a look and use it. I would love to see this really spark along the ETL development process. I'd like to see it vastly reduce the cost of implementing ETL subsystems. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening, and bye for now.